As always, tonight's lesson is Le'ila Nishmas Yitzchak Tzvi and Yosef. His neshama should have an elevation. I come with all the energy and the excitement of the convention. I just flew back this morning. And today we're going to talk about Rivkah. So, I just realized I didn't prepare a joke. So I'll just tell you something from the convention. I have a cousin who's really funny, funnier than me. He was going around the convention. He has a whole TikTok page measuring the length of people's beards. He had a ruler, a tape measure. Yeah, he was going around measuring the length of people's beards. He found some of the, those of us that roll beards, long than 22 inches. He found the winner. He was very excited. Very excited. So one of the fun things that we do at conventions is, I know you. Who are you? Who are you married to? Who you're related to? The Jewish geography, right? Whenever you get a group of people in the room, the first thing is the Jewish geography. So let's start tonight's discussion about Rivkah with some Jewish geography. Who is her family? Where does she come from? Okay. My cousin is Avram Rappaport from Atlantic City. His name is Rabbi Raps. If you just Google Rabbi Raps on TikTok, whatever, he's like 200 and something thousand followers. Seriously, he's out there. He has his video 80,000 likes on. He's a real following. Rabbi Raps. Anyway. New Orleans is NOLA for all of you people in the room. There you go. Hello, Shalom from Tzvat. Shalom from Pennsylvania. Good evening. Yosef Stein's watching us from Morristown. Julia says she loves Rabbi Raps. That's Chana's first cousin. He's a great guy. I like him a lot too. Okay, anyway. So let's get to it. Yes, Rabbi Raps is my cousin. Yes. My new claim to fame. Okay, so in honor of Yitzchak and Yosef, let's get started. Tonight we're going to talk about Rivkah. Rivkah is the daughter of Besuah. Now, if you remember, Abraham is one of three sons. Three brothers that were born to Terach. You don't remember all their names. Just remember Abraham, you know him, and Nachar. Now, Nachar has a son. He's married to Milcah. And Nachar and Milcah have a son called Besuah. They have other sons too. But the one we're going to talk about is Besuah. Besuah gets married. I don't know his wife's name. And he has a son, Lavan, and a daughter called Rivkah. That was easy enough, right? We kept that simple. Okay. So now, Yitzchak is getting old. And Avraham says, it's time for me to find a wife for Yitzchak. He had almost slaughtered him as a sacrifice at the binding of Isaac. And therefore, he says, it's time for me to find him a wife. And he calls on Eliezer, his faithful, loyal servant. He says to Eliezer, hold on to my holiest thing I owe, my bris. And I want you to swear that you will find me a wife from my family, not a local girl from the land of Canaan, not one of the local pagan girls, not a girl from your family, Eliezer, because you come from the family of Ham. I want a girl from my family. Eliezer swears. And at that time, Avram signs a contract giving all of his wealth to his son, Yitzchak. In addition, he loads up, the Torah describes in great detail how Eliezer loads up 10 camels full of wealth, of jewelry, of rings, of gold, 10 camels to show that his master Avram was very wealthy. And with these 10 camels and a whole entourage of servants to accompany the camels, Eliezer begins his journey from the land of Israel, where Avram was in Hebron, to all the way to Haran, which is in what's today Iraq. It's a 17-day journey by camel. Camels go slow, 10 camels, it's a whole story, a ganze Maisa, right? 17-day journey. God does a miracle for Eliezer, and he has what's called Kfitzas Haderach. That means the 17-day journey took 1 day. Took 1 day. That's a miracle. And remember that miracle, because later on tonight I'm going to go back to that miracle. So just remember, store away. Yes, you're making faces already, Sidel. It's a miracle. You heard of a miracle before? It was a miracle. So there's many explanations why God would do a 1 day miracle. The Rebbe has a beautiful and lengthy legal explanation about the fact that the contract was dated on that day. Avram didn't post-date the contract, so that there should be time in between signing over all of his wealth to his son and his servant getting to talk about the shidduch. Shouldn't be time in between, So God made a miracle happen all in one day. Okay, fine. Anyway, he arrives that evening in the city of Haran. And where does he go? To the well. To the well. That's like going to the modern day club, just to the bar. He goes to the well. He's standing by the well. And if you know the story, Eliezer prays to God. He says, God, show for me, do for me a kindness. Show me a sign. Who is the girl that you have chosen to be the wife of my master Yitzchak? The girl I will show such kindness that when I ask her for water, not only will she give me water, but she'll even give water to my camels. This will be the wife that you have chosen for Yitzchak. What happens? Right at that very moment, even before the Torah says, before he finished to pray, God already sent the answer, and out comes Rivkah from her home, walking to the well to go get water. She's coming with her big container, big pitcher on her shoulder. Beautiful girl. The Torah told us she was a beautiful appearance. She was a virgin. She was pure. She was holy. And she is going to the well. Eliezer looks at this beautiful girl, and he sees something very miraculous. When she goes up to the well, most of the girls have to bend down and take the rope. You take the rope down to look at the water. The water rose to greet her. Eliezer's curiosity is aroused. She's very beautiful. So he goes over to her, quite nonchalant, and he asks her, can I please have a little bit to drink from your water? Okay, that's what he asks her. How does she respond? So let's share our screen. If you're watching on my personal page, let's share our screen. If you have it sitting in the class, we're going to read from chapter 26 of Genesis, verse number 18. And she says, drink, my Lord. In those days, Lord was like you say today, Mr. or Sir. And she hastened and lowered her pitcher to her hand, and she gave him to drink. I'm reading this. I can say this outside. I want you to pay attention to some words here. She hastened and lowered her pitcher to her hand. These are two acts of not just giving water, but of extra kindness. She didn't just say, okay, give me a minute, let me come. Remember, these are heavy pitchers. Now, I'm not an expert in carrying water, but from the little that I've read and studied, is like a whole technique. They were taking not water for like a glass of water. They were taking water for the whole house, for cooking, for bathing, for whatever they were doing, washing the dishes. So they had a big amount of water, and there's some technique to get it onto your shoulder. She's a little girl. He's much taller than her. She could have said, here, take a drink. But that would have been uncomfortable for him to drink while it's still on her shoulder. So she doesn't only hasten to give him the water. After she did all this work to get that big jug of water onto her shoulder, she's now working to get that jug off of her shoulder. Let's read verse 19. And she finished giving him to drink, and without being asked, she said, I will also draw for your camels until they will have finished drinking. So here, without being asked, she on her own offers to go get water for the camels. And she hastened. Again, here you see the second time. Matmaher. She very quickly, she emptied her pitcher into the trough. That's what the camels drink from. And she ran again to the well to draw water. And she drew for all his camels. So here you'll notice that she didn't only empty the pitcher that the strange man had drunk from, because you could say, she just wants you're going to bring home a pitcher of water that some random stranger drank from. You wouldn't do that in your house. But she actually not only emptied the pitcher, she goes back to the well and back to the camels and the man was astonished at her standing silent, waiting to know whether the Lord had caused his way to prosper or not. This is the verse. So she's running back and forth to get water. And what's the man doing? He's standing and watching, silently observing, saying, is God causing my way to prosper or not? Now, I have to tell you, do you know how much water a camel drinks? You're laughing. I actually checked. You are correct. Camels store water in their humps. That's why the Torah told us that they're camels. The Torah doesn't give us any details in the Torah are not random. If the Torah chose to tell you a detail, it's because that detail has relevance to the story. So it's important for us reading this story to know that the animal that Eliezer was taking to cross the desert was not 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 camels with these big humps that store water for long journeys. Camels can drink 30 gallons of water in 13 minutes. That's how fast they drink. So imagine 30 gallons of water times 10. That's 300 gallons of water. Okay, so now let's put that into context. Let's say you go to Publix and you buy, well, they sell like the gallon bottles of water, right? How many gallons can you hold in your hand? 2 gallons? If you really see my good one before my surgery, 4 gallons? That's it. 300 of them. Up and down. Notice also there's like she's going up and down to the well to draw and going back and forth. It's not like she's standing pouring. No, but you have to pour them. Just imagine pouring 300 bottles of water. Gallon bottles of water. I'm not talking about like little, even small bottles would be a lot. 300 gallons of water, approximately. That's a lot of water. And the entire time that she's doing the water, what is Eliezer doing? Standing there and watching. And by the way, Eliezer also had other men that he had brought with him. The Torah says that the men that he also said that he brought men with him and they also came to stay. So there's other men there. And she's working and they're watching. Okay. You might say this is not right? But when she finishes giving all the camels enough that all the camels have what to drink, he is so confident that this is the girl that God has chosen to be the wife of his master Yitzchak, without even asking her what is her name or what family she comes from. He's so confident that God's mission has come to fruition, that God has answered his prayer, that immediately he takes off he takes a nose ring and bracelets weighing 10 silver shekel or big, expensive jewelry, and he gives it to her. And only after he gives her the jewelry does he ask her, by the way, what's your name? He finds out that indeed she is from the family of Milcah, the sister of Nachar, the family of Avram. Okay, so now very interesting story. There's a beautiful commentary on this. How does Eliezer know that he's not like taking a risk by seeing a girl? So a girl is nice, she gave water. That's proof that she should be the one to marry the family of Yitzchak, family of Avram. But notice I pointed out the word vatmaher. She hastened. Where else do you see someone not just doing kindness, but hastening and running and rushing to do kindness? Anyone know? I'm watching the chats. There's a question here. How does this 3-year-old carry many gallons of water? We're going to talk about that towards the end of the class. Hold that question, Yosef. It's a good question. Any ideas? Who else do we know in the Torah runs to do kindness to somebody else? That's right. Avraham. On the 3rd day after the circumcision of Avraham, when he's sitting outside, remember when the 3 angels come to tell Avraham the good news? And Avraham sees the 3 men in the distance. What does Avraham do? He runs to greet them. And then when they come sit down, he runs to go slaughter 3 calves to give them tongue. And he runs. The Torah uses the word he runs. This is a man who is how old? 99 years old. 90 close. 99 years old. Just had a circumcision 3 days ago. On their life. Do you know what that life means? He's running like he's in the New York Marathon. He's running. The word the Torah uses. And the Torah says he ran, it means he ran. So there's kindness, and then there's kindness on the level of Avraham. You asked me for a favor? I happen to be available. I'm not doing anything right now, or I can, I'm bored. Okay, you want me to come over? I'll come over. That's one kind of kindness. Another kind of kindness is not just that when it's convenient for me, I'll help you, or I'll do it. I'm not going to exert myself if it's not too hard. The kindness of Avram, the kindness that is exemplified in the family of Abraham, is one of running to do kindness to somebody else, of such an intense desire to show kindness to another human being that there's no inhibition, there's no restraint, there's no, let me walk. No, let me run. When Eliezer sees the way this girl runs back and forth to the well, she hurries to lower the pitcher. She doesn't even waste any time. This girl belongs in the family of Avraham. She would make a good daughter-in-law for Abraham. She understands what it means to do a kindness to another person. So that's how Eliezer knew that this is the girl for Yitzchak. Anyway, the story continues. There's a lot that I want to talk about. Thank you all that are commenting where you're from. We're going to go through the list later. So he asks her, is there a place for me to stay in your house? She says, sure, come. Lavan comes out. We did a whole class on Lavan last year. Lavan comes out. He got rid of the idols. Lavan is a very self-serving individual. I want to point that out, and it's also going to be important later. Lavan is the epitome of a self-serving, selfish creature narcissistic person who sees everything within his own. How do you affect me? Kindness, Rivkah is all about how can I help you? And the Lavan is the exact opposite of that. How do you help me? So Lavan removed the idols. They thought it was Avram coming. They didn't even realize it was Eliezer, the servant of Avram, until he said who he is. They were sure. They saw the miracles and they saw the wealth. They were sure it was Eliezer. It was Avram himself. They didn't know what he looked like even before Facebook. You know what people looked like back then. Saw a tall guy. He looked important. They figured it's him. So he made space for the camels. And Eliezer comes in. They say, eat. And actually, Besuel wanted to poison who he thought was Abraham and take all of his wealth for himself. And Eliezer says, I cannot eat until I do my job. I'm here on the mission. Let me do my mission and I'll eat. And while he's talking and negotiating and describing the whole story about God, of Avram sending him and coming to the well and his prayer, during that dialogue, an angel comes and switches around the plates of food. And the plate of food that Besuel had poisoned, or Lavan had poisoned, not sure who put the poison in. The plate of food that had been poisoned for Eliezer is switched and given to Besuel. And Besuel ends up eating his own poison, and he dies. And in the morning, they all agreed to the shidduch. They agreed that Rivkah should go to marry Yitzchak. In the morning, when Eliezer says, let me take this girl back home with me, so Besuel is no longer discussing anything. You'll see in the verses, we're not going to do it inside right now, but trust me, the verses say that her brother spoke, Besuel had died. And originally, the family did not want to let Rivkah go back with Eliezer. They wanted to wait a year, 10 months, give her time. That's the custom in that place, so we don't get married immediately. And Eliezer says, I'm not waiting. So they asked Rivkah what to do. They were afraid to argue with Eliezer because Besuel just died. They tried poisoning Eliezer. Didn't work, so they're a little afraid. So they asked Rivkah, what do you want? And Rivkah says, even if you don't let me go, I'm going with him. Rivkah refused to stay even one day in the house of her family, of her father, Besuel, the Lavad. And she, the very next morning, it says also in the Medrash, Eliezer saw an angel waiting to go. And immediately, the moment she was ready to go, they were waiting, and they left that next morning. She didn't even stay for the funeral, for the Shiva, for nothing. She left and went with Eliezer, where she meets Yitzchak, and they get married. Torah describes how she covered her face, the idea of the veil, of a marriage. Okay. 20 years go by. How old was she? So Yosef Stein wanted to know. Yosef's watch. So we're going to talk about the end of the class. According to Rashi, she was 3 years old at this time. 3 years, yes. 1, 2, 3. That's 3, yeah. And she's carried. Well, that's what bothers you about that? She's 3? She's getting married. So carrying a pitcher of water, yeah. Who sends a 3-year-old to the well? Okay. But who sends a 3-year-old to get married is a bigger question. We'll discuss this soon. Although one already answers the other, which is the fact that she was getting water from the well shows that when we say 3 years old, she was not your typical 3-year-old. A 3-year-old wouldn't be going to the well. She wouldn't be carrying pitchers of water. She wouldn't be feeding other people. So Rivkah was not what we would normally view as a 3-year-old. Let's just keep that in mind. She's carrying water, and she's independent enough to go to the well. She's not that little.
And they asked her if she wants to go.
Also shows she's not so little. They asked her, very good. So they asked her if she wants to go. Because we're not talking about a 3-year-old. We're not talking about a 3-year-old. I'll also tell you, though, that what?
And she didn't have the twins until she was 20.
Well, it was 20 years later. The Torah does not tell us how old she was when she was. Okay, I'm going to say something now. The Torah does not tell us any time throughout the entire story of Rivkah's life how old she is. Not when she got married, not when she had children, not even how old she was when she died. In fact, if I skip ahead a little bit, the Torah does not even tell us when she died. Her death is not recorded in the Torah. Yes, it's a sad story. The end of her life is not a happy story. And we'll get there. If you can be patient, I won't leave till we finish the story and talk about why she was, according to Rashi, 3 years old. We'll talk about it. I'm prepared for this. L'chaim. Hey, don't go away. We're going to get to the age of 3 thing. Okay, but let me continue the story first. She comes back, she gets married, 20 years go by, and she can't have children. She prays, and Yitzchak prays, and she prays, and finally she becomes pregnant with twins. And it's a very painful pregnancy. Every time she goes by a house of study, the Shem and Aver had a yeshiva, she would feel kicking inside. Every time she went by a house of idol worship, she felt kicking inside. And it was very, very painful. She couldn't even handle the pain. Imagine you wait 20 years to have a child. Well, it's actually 10 years, because the way Rashi understands it, I should clarify. She was 3 years old when she got married, 10 years until she was old enough to become pregnant, and then another 10 years after she was 13, that until they started really praying, why are you not having a baby? I will also tell you already now, since we're already talking about it, according to them, I think it's the Malbim, she was 13 when she got married and waited 20 years. And according to the Seder Olam, which is a book that goes through the chronology of all the generations and when they got married, and they're born, the year that they died, she was 14 when she got married. So she was still young, 3 or 13. She was young, and then she waited a long time. And again, we'll get to why she was so young when she got married. I will address it at the end of the class. That's going to be the ending of the class. Because it'll also be a lesson for us. I mean, not only will I address why she was so young, there's a very important me in the Bible lesson for us. What we can learn from the fact that Rivkah got married right away and didn't waste any time in getting married. Besides that, she got married, Robert. Besides for that. There's a lesson here. There's a lesson, which not a marriage lesson, but a very important lesson. So stay tuned. Anyway, back to the story. So she can't handle the pregnancy. She finds out she has 2 warring children inside her. Children will fight till the end, Yaakov and Esav. And the birth is excruciating. So excruciating that first Yaakov tries being born. Yaakov sticks his hand, the whole thing. Esav comes out. And when Esav comes out, Yaakov is holding on to the heel of his brother. They were literally fighting in a womb who would come out first. Whoever had a baby here could try and imagine that kind of a drama happening in your birth canal. Not just trying to get one baby out, but 2 babies trying to get at the same time. Not pretty. It also tells us that Esav was afraid that his mother Rivkah would have 12 children, 12 tribes from Rivkah. And Esav, when he came out, ripped his mother's insides and tore out her uterus, removing her ability to ever have children ever again. So I tell you, it was a painful delivery. It was literally Esav ripped out her uterus, and she couldn't have children after that. Her womb, whatever. So painful. Anyway, the 2 children go up. At the age of 13, when Avram passes away, Yaakov becomes a righteous person. Esav goes off to his own way, doing whatever he was doing, idol worship, etc. And more and more years go by. Her husband is blind. And you know the story that Yitzchak wants to give a blessing to his son, Esav. Now, when Rivkah, his wife, hears about this, she's very, very distressed. She doesn't like him. Now, the reason why I'm telling you this story, now it's part of her life, but I want to address, I missed the question I wanted to address when I got distracted by her age, which I wanted to deal with later. The question I wanted to address is that some people might think, mistakenly, that Rivkah was a very sweet and kind person, but very simplistic. She was a little girl. She didn't know better. She was a very naive, innocent girl that was helping a stranger. Didn't her mommy teach her not to talk to strangers? And if she was a little smarter, she never would have given Eliezer so much water to drink. There could be such a notion from the more sophisticated people in the world that think of the story of Rivkah, think of this, you know, we praise her kindness, but really she's not a role model for us because she didn't have healthy boundaries. She didn't know how to protect herself from strangers. Not good behavior. So I want you to know that Rivkah was actually quite intelligent, quite street smart, and knew how to take care of herself. And the next few stories I'm going to share with you all show the intelligence and the cunning, if you will. I wouldn't want to call a woman cunning, a bunch of ladies sitting in front of me. But women, not you, none of you, can be the men are smiling, can be very cunning, very smart, very, let's find a better word, very, I don't have a good word. We'll find one. And how they get their way. So, she comes to her son Yaakov, and you all know the story. I'm going to go through this very quickly. She calls her son Yaakov, and I have it here in the text. So let's read the text. We're going to share our screen, and we're going to read from chapter 27. It's only one chapter later, and basically it's verse 5. But Rivkah overheard when Isaac spoke to Esau his son, and Esau went to the field to hunt game to bring it. So Rebekah says to Jacob her son, saying, behold, I have heard your father speaking to Esau your brother. Basically, I heard everything. I know what your father is planning to do. Listen to me. I have a plan. And what's the plan? She told her son, go get 2 goats. I'm going to slaughter food. I know how your father likes it. I'll cook it for you. And then he's worried. What does Yaakov say? I can't trick my father. Esav is hairy. I'm smooth-skinned. He'll know that it's not the right person. So verse 15, I'm skipping a few verses. Rebekah took the costly garments of Esau, her elder son, which were with her in the house, and she dressed Jacob, her younger son. And the hides of the kids, meaning that's the skin, the fur of the goats, not the kids, meaning, goats are called kids also. She put on his hands and on the smoothness of his neck. So now if you felt his neck, instead of feeling a nice smooth kid, you felt the fur of the goat that she had slaughtered. It felt like Esau. And she gave the tasty foods and the bread that she had made into the hand of Jacob her son. So here you see that when she wants to do something, she convinces her son. She has a way to trick her husband. She has a whole plan. She takes actions and matters into her own hands. She's a woman of action. And indeed, as the story goes, Yitzchak is fooled. He gives the blessings to Yaakov. Esau finds out and he wants to kill his brother. And now things are not good. Let's read now verse 41. Yeah.
Why would Isaac want Esau to have the blessing?
That's an excellent question. The question is, why would Yitzchak want to give the blessing to Esau and not to Yaakov? Did he know that Esau was the right child? So this is really a question that deserves a lot of discussion. I've talked about it before. It's understand the spiritual energy of Esau that Yitzchak wanted to elevate and to refine. Esau has very tremendous spiritual potential. I'll just say one thing from last week's class. Do you remember last week we talked about Yishmael? I told you that Avram, who was the ultimate of chesed, of kindness, had an affinity to his son Yishmael that was similar in personality of chesed, but chesed of klipa, chesed of unholiness. And last week, that's what it says in Kabbalah. And I explained what that means. Holy kindness is which is about the other person. It's from a place of humility. Unholy kindness from a place of ego. We explained last week. I believe that I mentioned last week that the Kabbalah also says that Yitzchak had a closeness to Esau because Yitzchak is Gevura, discipline, severity of holiness, and Esau is Gevura de Klipa. Esau is Gevura, the same personality of strongness, of fire, of severity, but in an unholy way. The shell of it. So there was a natural affinity. Yaakov was not Yitzchak. Yaakov was a man of compassion, a man of balance, a man of very different creature. I hope that answers the question. There's a lot more to say, but that's not for now. Anyway, so Esau now hates his brother in his heart. Let's read this verse. This is verse 41, still chapter 27. 1 second. I will try Annabeth. And Esau hated Jacob because of the blessing that his father had blessed him. And Esau said to himself, let the days of mourning for my father draw near, then I will kill my brother Jacob. So Esau is planning in his heart. In his heart, he says to himself, my father's old, he's half senile, he's blind, he's going to die, and I'm going to kill my brother Yaakov. I'm going to get revenge for having stolen those blessings from me. The very next verse tells us, and Rebekah was told of the word of Esau, her elder son. Who told her? Ask that question. Rebekah was told the words of Esau, her elder son. And she sent and called Jacob, her younger son. And she said to him, behold, your brother Esau regrets his relation with you and he wishes to kill you. Therefore, she tells him, I want you to run away to my brother Lavan. He has girls, and go over there and you'll be safe. But how did she know? How did she know what Esau was saying to himself? He didn't say it to his mother. He didn't say it to his wives. He said it to himself. So how did she know what he was thinking? You know how? She was a prophetess. She was a prophetess. And here is an explicit source in the Torah that she was told by divine spirit, by the Ruach HaKodesh, by God himself sent the spirit of prophecy upon her, that she was able to hear the words that Esau was saying to himself. She knew what he was thinking in his heart. So she tells her son, you got to run away. You got to run away so I don't lose both of you in one day. By the way, that's also a prophecy. I talked about it on Shabbos. How did Esau die? Very quickly. How did Esau die? Hushim, the grandson of Yaakov, chopped off, hit off his head during the funeral, or before the funeral of Yaakov. So the head of Esau and the body of Jacob were buried on the same day. All in the prophecy, she says, then, if you don't run away, he'll kill you. You'll both die the same day. And I'm going to show you again the brilliance of Rivkah. Again, she's very smart. She's what you know what makes a really wise woman? You know what makes a woman a really wise woman? Not just when they get their husbands to do what they want. That every woman gets. A wise woman doesn't just get her husband to do what she wants. What does a wise woman do? Help me out. What does a wise woman do now? What does a wise woman do?
She improves him as well.
She improves him, of course. Anyone on chatting? Oh, very good, Esther. We won't tell Rick what you said. A wise woman is exactly what Esther just said. She convinces the husband that what she wants is actually his idea. She convinced the husband it's his idea, then he's all for it, right? If he thinks he's doing it for you, you'll never hear the end of it. But if you think that it was his idea, oh, I'm brilliant. Like I thought of it. Even my wife likes the idea. I must be a genius, right? So Rivkah, not only does she have divine prophecy, not only does Rivkah know that her son needs to run away before Esau kills him, not only does she make a plan where he should go, she then goes to her husband Yitzchak and convinces her husband Yitzchak that this plan that she had, that he should go away to her brother, to her family in Haran, is actually Yitzchak's idea. How does she do that? Let's keep on reading a little later in the same chapter. Now we're going to go to verse 46. And Rebekah says to Isaac, I am disgusted with my life because of the daughters of Ches. If Jacob takes a wife of the daughters of Ches like these, from the daughters of the land, of what use is life to me? She comes to her husband, says, Yaakov can't marry one of the local girls. That's disgusting. They're idol worshippers. They're repulsive. Don't you remember how your father wouldn't let you marry a local girl? He made you marry me from the family. It's time to do the same thing for Yaakov. And of course, Yitzchak thinks it's a great idea. I thought I copied other verses. Yitzchak calls him his son and says, Yaakov, I have a good idea for you. You should go. I bless you. Go to your family, and there you'll find a wife, and all is good. So Rivkah is sending away her son, really, so she didn't get killed by Esau. But she convinced her husband that Yaakov needs to go to get married. And Yitzchak gives a blessing to his son. You should go, get married, send us a wedding invitation, and live happily ever after. And Yitzchak gives him a blessing. So Esau tries to stop him, but that's another story. And he leaves. Okay. Now let's get to the end of Rivkah's life. What happens after that? We don't hear about Rivkah again in the Torah. And this is not written explicitly, but this is the way I believe is simple understanding of the Torah story. Yaakov goes, how many years is Yaakov living in his father-in-law's house, by Lavan's house? 20 years. 20 years. 21 years. 7 and 7 and 6. 20 years. 20 years. And then he spends another 2 years, 18 months, traveling back. He stops, he leaves Lavan, he stops in a place called Sukkot, in a place called Shalom. I don't know exactly, different places where he stops and he builds tents. Rivkah, his mother, has not seen her son since he ran away. She wasn't at the wedding. She wasn't there. She never met her daughter-in-laws, seemingly, as far as we know. She never met any of her grandchildren. And Rivkah sends a message to her son, it's time for you to come home. Even though the hatred of her son Esav hadn't gone away. Possibly because she knew she was going to die. And she sends Devorah, Devorah is her maid that had left with her. When she Rivkah left, she took her maid, her meinikta, literally her wet nurse. More than a wet nurse, her guide who accompanied her when she left to go marry Yitzchak. She took her maid with her, and she sent Devorah to go tell her son to come back home. And the Torah cryptically tells us one random verse in like 2 weeks prior to the Parsha of Yishlach that Devorah died, and she was buried under an oak tree of mourning, under a alon bachus, the tree of mourning, and she was buried over there. And then it goes on to Yisrael getting the wrestling match with the angels, and where his name was changed from Jacob to Yisrael. Who's Devorah? Why does the Torah tell us she died? So Devorah is her maid, and the reason why it tells us she died, Rashi tells us, is because the Torah was hinting that Rivkah also died. Rivkah also died. But the Torah does not tell us explicitly about the death of Rivkah, because when Rivkah was buried, she was buried in secret. When Rivkah was buried, she was not buried with a proper royal entourage and a funeral procession and the eulogy and speeches. She was buried at night. The people of Ches, the local residents of Ches, where she lived in Hebron, that was the people who used to own the land, they buried her in a private ceremony that no one was there. Why did she not have a proper funeral? With a eulogy, with a rabbi, So as we're told, there was no one to do her funeral. Her husband, Yitzchak, was home blind. Couldn't go out. Her son, Yaakov, was away by Haran in a different country. So if there would be a public funeral, who'll be the only person to show up? Esav. The one that was hated by everyone. The robber, the thief, the immoral person. And they didn't want the people to say, this is the legacy of Rivkah. This is how she's remembered. She's the one that mothered Esav. And therefore, that Esav shouldn't give the eulogy for his mother, so to say. He did. And Esav might not have said a nice eulogy about his mother. Remember, Esav and his mother, who's the one that helped Yaakov get the blessings? Right. So, because of that, she was buried in a private ceremony all alone. Sad ending. I know. It's not a happy ending. Okay. But now, my friends, let's before we go to the end. So, what do we see of Rivkah here? Rivkah is a girl of tremendous kindness, but also tremendous wisdom, very understanding of the difference between Yaakov and Esav, very, very capable of taking care of herself and figuring out how to get what needs to be gotten and how to do what needs to be done in very smart, sophisticated ways. She's also a woman of tremendous sacrifice. She tells her son, run away to go get married, because that's what her son had to do, and she would never see him again. Tremendous sacrifice. That's the story of Rivkah, a prophetess, a smart woman, a leader of the Jewish people. Now let's talk about how old she was. Okay? So many people know that Rivkah was. So any questions before I go to the last part? No. Yeah.
I was just wondering if because she was a prophetess, she might have knew all this when she sent him away.
She may have. She was very sad to send him away, but she did it for the greater good. When she sent him away, it was definitely not something she wanted to do, but it was something that she had to do. And she did it when she did it. Okay, so now, my friend, let us get to One of those issues that many rabbis try to pretend like doesn't exist. In general, I have philosophy, the things in the Torah that makes us, let's address it. Let's not hide. Let's not hide behind things that don't fit into modern day sensibilities. The idea of a 3-year-old getting married does not fit to today's sensibilities. Even a 13-year-old. Let's say she was 13. Old enough to have children. Still doesn't fit to today's sensibilities. Leaving behind her family, going with a stranger. How do we explain this? So you have to know that the fact that Rivkah became the woman she became may have not happened. May have not happened. How did it happen? So I want to read to you a verse from Shir Hashirim, from Song of Songs. You all heard of Song of Songs, right? Shir Hashirim, Song of Songs, written by King Solomon, describing the love story of the Jewish people. And in this love story, in chapter 2, verse number 2, he writes a verse as follows. What does it say? Kisheshana bein hacheichim. As a rose among the thorns, Kein ra'ayasi bein habanais, so is my beloved among the daughters. That's what it says in the verse. As a rose among the thorns, so is my beloved among the daughters. What is this verse referring to? So the Medrash says, I have the Hebrew here in front of me. I shouldn't really put it in the text, but I'm going to read to you what it says from the Medrash. Rabbi Yitzchak says that this verse in Shir Hashirim of the rose among the thorns is actually a verse referring to Rivkah. He quotes a verse that Yitzchak was 40 years old. They took Rivkah, the daughter of Besul of Aram, from Padan Aram, the sister of Lavan. So why does he asks a question? Why doesn't he say she's from Padan Aram? We already know that if she's a sister of Lavan, and we know that Lavan was an Aramean that was from Padan Aram. We already know where the family is from. It was in the end of the week parsha before. Why doesn't it repeat it? Rather, the Torah is repeating that she came from the family of Lavan, who is from Padan Aram, to tell you that she came from a family of Ramai. Ramai means trickers, swindlers. A Ramai means a con artist, a scammer. She was from a family of Ramaim, a family of thieves and scam artists. Her brother was a swindler. The people of her area, the whole city, was a city of swindlers and scam artists. And yet, this righteous woman emerged from their midst. To what is this comparable? To a Sheshana bein hacheichim, to a rose growing among thorns. You have a thorn bush. It's prickly. You touch it, you bleed. But out of the thorn bush comes a beautiful rose. So the Torah is telling us again in the introduction to Rivkah that she was from Padan Aram, to tell you that she wasn't just a girl. She was a girl who grew up in the most hostile, anti-kind, anti-hospitable, anti-caring environment a girl could grow up in. What is a swindler? What's a scam artist? By definition, they're selfish. The reason why a scam artist or a swindler swindles money is because they don't care about you. If they had any empathy, they would feel bad for the people they're swindling, right? If you have empathy, you can't be a scammer. It's a contradiction. If I have any empathy, if I can feel your loss in any way, I'm not going to steal your money. But if I'm a scammer, means I'm inherently narcissistic. I'm inherently self-centered. The entire family and the entire city is one of Ramoyim, of trickers, of swindlers, of scam artists. And by the way, we see that with Lavan tricking his own daughter. You know what kind of lowlife you need to be to trick your own daughter on her wedding night? And put your sister, like, you have to be like a mentally ill human being to do that. I'm serious. It's hard to imagine a father, no matter how much you don't like your daughter, to do that to your daughter on her wedding night. It's to me, that's more mind-boggling than a young girl getting married. But anyway, so this is the kind of family she grew up in. And therefore, Rabbi Yitzchak says that the verse in Song of Songs, a rose amongst the thorns, is Rivkah amongst the thorns. Therefore, the Rebbe explains something very beautiful. How long can a rose stay in the thorn bush for? Just for as long as it needs to grow. The moment it grows, if you leave it there, it can be destroyed. The moment that the rose had grown enough to be able to cut it from its source where it grew, to take it and put it on the dining room table, to put it into a beautiful environment, that was the very minute that she had to be taken from that environment. If you remember, I told you earlier that God did a miracle. And what normally would have been a 17-day journey to go from Israel to Aram Naraim, to Haran, happened in one day, is because, as Rashi understands it, the day she became old enough to have intercourse, the day until 3 years old, a girl is not considered physiologically able to have intercourse. Theoretically, if a man would rape a girl before she was 3 years old, she would still be considered a virgin. Her virginity would still be intact. Again, I'm going from the Jewish sources here. Her virginity would still be intact because she hasn't fully developed and matured yet. The babies. Right. I guess so. I feel, they're babies. There you go. Esther says they're babies. So only when she became 3 is she now considered a child that's able to have intercourse, that could be violated by a man, that could be negatively influenced by the negative environment in which she lived. And therefore, if she would have remained in that environment, there was a chance that she could have been violated physically. And there was a greater chance that she could be violated spiritually, psychologically, emotionally, spiritually. She was as pure could be. She had no inhibition about her to do kindness for another human being. There was nothing in her psyche at that point, when she turned 3, that took away from the holiness that she had been born with. But God knew that if she would remain in that kind of an environment, if she remained in the influence of Besuel and her brother Lavan and her classmates and the local society and the local culture, she may become, if not physically violated, spiritually she will lose her purity. You know how many kids grow up like they're beautiful, pure kids, and then they lose it because of the environment in which they are, the stuff that they're fed on TV, in the news, in the stories, in the games that they play, they go to school, and these sweet, beautiful kids become not so sweet and beautiful anymore. That could have happened to Rivkah. And therefore, the minute that she was fitting to be taken out of that environment, the day that she was fitting to be taken and saved from the most unholy place of the world, a place that brought God's anger to the world, she was taken from there. She would wait 10 years till she could consummate a marriage with Yitzchak. That was a 20-year gap, 10 years till she was 13, and then from 13 till 23, that she was already married in the more standard, typical sense of the word, and she's waiting to have children. The first 10 years don't even count. But she was waiting, she was engaged. These 10 years, not in Lavan's house, not in an unholy environment where they would poison their... You understand? I'll give you the contrast. Rivkah sees a guest, let me give you water. Let me give your camels water. Let me give them enough till they drink till they're full, and they fill the whole hump of 30 gallons each. Besuel's mindset is, here comes a guy with a camel full of wealth. Where's my poison? Let me poison him and keep the wealth of the camel. He can be a rich man. There's even more money. Your daughter can marry a rich man. Again, think about it for a second. What would happen if the angel hadn't done the miracle? Just think of this moment. Just pop in my head. What would happen if the angel had not done the miracle and switched around the plates of Besuel and Eliezer? And Besuel's plan came to fruition. Eliezer would have died. Avram wouldn't know what happened to him. Again, there was no WhatsApp. There was no pin my location. His cell phone pinged in Besuel's house. He would have died. They would have dumped his body, and they would have buried his body in the backyard. And then they would have taken it very happy. They would have gotten 10 camels full of wealth. And what would have happened to Rivkah? Nothing. She would remain in her father's house. she would have lost a chance to marry a rich family. If you're a normal father, would you do that? No. But if you're so selfish that all you see is the money in front of your eyes and you can't see past that money, and you can't even see like for a minute about what the future, your daughter, her future, where she belongs, what's in her best interest, all you can see is the money on that camel. It's hard for us to even relate to such a selfishness. That's the environment she was living in. So the wonder is not why she left when she was 3. The wonder is how she survived till she was 3, not being contaminated till then. How she retained her purity and her holiness and her spiritual sensitivity to do kindness to another person, despite the selfishness of her home. That's really the wonder of the story. But the moment that she became old enough to be taken out of that environment, she was taken to the environment of Avram's house, where she learned how to be kind the way Avram was kind, running to help another person. Now, by the way, I did some homework today on roses. So this is from Mashiach, it's a famous talk. They have roses amongst thorns. I was curious about the thorns on the roses. So I actually used my other friend, so there's, Rabbi Google. And you know what I discovered about roses and thorns? Roses actually don't have thorns. Although the verse says like a rose amongst the thorns, it's just that doesn't mean thorns. They're called prickles. Thorns are actually like leaves or from the stem. These are prickles that grow from the epidermis or the cortex. What do? Why do roses have thorns? All roses have thorns. The whole way up the stem, it's all roses. All prickles, not thorns. Call them by the proper scientific name. We're sophisticated people here. So why, although the word prickles does not sound very sophisticated, I must tell you. But why are there prickles all along? In fact, the shorter the stem, the more the prickles are. Then yes, you agree, Florida, when the rose gets longer, the prickles gets more spaced out. There's a lot of prickles. So the classic answer, the first answer is that roses are actually very tasty. I've never eaten a rose. You could get served flowers on like dinner plates. You go to fancy dinner, they serve you flowers. You're like wondering what are you doing with this? They're edible. Animals like to eat roses. Deer love the taste of roses. All mammals, rabbits, cats, they would eat the roses. And if the roses wouldn't have these prickles, they wouldn't grow very long because they'd be eaten by somebody. So every kind of vegetation allows itself to be eaten by other animals, with one exception. There's only one plant that grows and says, I'm not letting you eat me. The rose has all of these prickles the whole way that the animal or the deer wants to eat it, can't eat it because the whole tongue will get scratched up. So it takes a bite, says, I can't eat this. But the smell draws animals to eat the roses, and they like the taste. That's what it says. But they can't eat it because of the thorns, the prickles, and that protects them. There's another reason for the thorns. This is less known, but this is actually the scientific reason. Aside from the animals, is that the prickles, they grow downwards. Notice that? They point down. Which way do the thorns point on the rose? Down. Dvorah says down. Dvorah knows flowers. They point down. Why do they point down? The prickles serve as hooks to help anchor the rose branch into the other vegetation below. Roses grow wild roses, bushes, right? They just grow. And unlike any other tree that has to somehow like build its own, system, its own like trellis, whatever, to go up, build a trunk and gets wider, but the roots. Roses don't develop any kind of trunk. So how do they grow tall? They stick their thorns, their prickles, into the leaves of the other vegetation that they're growing by. And when they stick it in, that causes the other vegetation to be stuck, trapped under their hook, so it can't grow up, to allow the rose to continue growing up on top of the back of the other vegetation, the other leaf that it hooks onto. So it kind of like makes a ladder, if you will, under the other things, and then they monopolize all the sunshine. Because every plant that will grow near a rose will end up getting trapped. The leaves end up getting trapped under the thorns, so the actual rose comes out on top. That's what those prickles do. They're hooks to anchor the rose branch into the other trees around it. Does this not describe Lavan and Bethuel to the T? I read this and I had like my brain was exploding. No joke. My brain was exploding. There were light bulbs going on everywhere. Ding, 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 ding. Love an alert. Love an alert. Dig yourself into somebody else's back to help build yourself up higher and keep them down. That is exactly the epitome of the selfishness of the home of Na'arayim, of these swindlers that Rivkah had to escape. They were the thorns, the prickles. They were the prickles that are hooking themselves into every single leaf and every single plant that's growing nearby. You want to grow? Get in there. Block yourself on top of them. Block them. Inhibit their ability to grow so you can grow taller and taller and taller, monopolize all the sunshine, and plants near roses die because of that. Roses don't need to be tended to. I became a botanist today. Wild roses grow on their own. Just leave them alone, they grow. They take over everything. Nothing else can grow next to them. They will always win. Because they're selfish. They stick their horns into their thorns, and they stop anything else from growing. So Rivkah is a Shoshana ben Achoichem. She's a rose that had to be separated from those thorns, from those prickles. That self-centered, selfish, let me stick myself into your back and grow myself off of your expense. That's what a swindler is, right? An honest person can get rich working hard. A swindler gets rich by stealing your money. They stop other people from growing, and they grow off the backs of other people. So Rivkah was the pure rose. Her family were these thorns, these prickles that were taking everyone else down so they can build up their own ego, their own self-aggrandizement. And therefore, she had to be taken out of this environment the day she was old enough to be taken away. What's the lesson for us from this? What's the meaning in the Bible from this comparison of Rivkah, our matriarch, being a rose? I see her thorns are to defer the animals from eating them. Besides for the eating them, as I explained, also they protect, they grow, they help them grow. But even to not allow animals to eat the rose is the same thing. Most vegetation allows itself to be eaten. What's the lesson for us, my friends? What's the meaning in the Bible? Our influences, our environment, and our culture, and our society, and the TV programs that go on the TV that we have in our house, for those that have a TV in their house, and the things we read on the internet, and the conversations we have in our home, and the radio that plays, if you like the radio in your car. These things have a direct influence on who we are. And if they have an influence on us, how much more so? How much more so? How much more so on the small child? Today's society is careless, is dangerously careless on what is being put into the brains of our children. What are they hearing? What are they seeing? What are they role modeling? The culture, whether it's movies, whether it's the Hollywood, whether it's TV, whether it's the games they play, the school environment, the conversation they overhear from their parents when they're talking. The way that children today, little kids, are so comfortable with being so selfish, so disrespectful, cursing, the violence that they see. It's just a video. It's just a video game. It's just TV. People don't babysit their kid. They put them in front of the TV. And whatever some producer in some TV station decided to put on the air is what your children are now going to imbibe in a way that will impact them for the rest of their lives. For the rest of their lives. Rebbe will give an example of a seed. That if you have a little seed and you scratch the seed, that tree is deformed forever. When the seed begins to grow, a little sapling, you push it a little bit, 2 inches. That tree will grow that way, sideways. Once it's a grown tree, it can already withstand. But a little innocent child, it's for all of us. But even more with a child. Rivkah was a young child. She was so impressionable. She was so pure. She couldn't be left in that environment for one day. And this is a very important lesson for all of us. We don't appreciate how what we hear, this is for all of it, impacts us. The music we listen to. The thoughts of the person that composed that music is in the music. When you listen to certain music, it makes you happy because it goes deep in. And certain music can have a negative influence on your psyche, on your soul. The conversation, I haven't listened to talk radio in probably 10 years. Many years ago, I used to listen to the radio in the car. It was so negative. And so it's not about politics. It becomes draining. I went to the car today, I listened to a class. I listened to either music or a class. The TV. The amount of garbage. I mean, it's all garbage, actually. But whether it's the news, whether it's made up, stories, whether it's values that are not real, whatever it is, violence, they have a tremendous influence on who we are, on what we become, on our environment, on us. So the lesson for us from Rivkah, one of the lessons for us, Rivkah was a pure, pure soul. Rivkah was a pure person who remained pure her whole life. You know how she remained pure her whole life? Because she left the negative influences of her society. She left behind the negativity, the selfishness, the callousness, the evil. Not evil in the evil way that people will define it as evil. But it was evil in the more insidious way. She left it all behind, and she went to the holy environment, to the home of Yitzchak. And because she went to a holy environment, she remained holy. When we listen to holy music, we feel holier. If we listen to non-holy music, that has an influence on us. When we listen to people talk in a negative way, we listen to negative conversation, disgusting, immoral conversation, crude, crass conversation, that has an impact on us. And we have to make sure every Jew inherits from Rivkah this genetic idea, this genetic personality of being a rose among thorns. We live in a very thorny society, very much a cutthroat, put me on top. If I have to put other people down and stick my thorns into someone else's leaf in order to get taller than them, that's the way we educate our children as a society. Strive to be the best, and then who cares about anybody else? We live in a society of thorns. And we have to remember we are the rose amongst the thorns. We need to do everything we can to ensure that our souls, our personality, our inherent desire to do kindness to another person should not become inhibited and taken away because we've allowed society to recalibrate us in an unholy way. Okay, that's the story.